Sometimes, the night you say yes is the night that changes your whole life. Ariel Monet didn't belong in rooms like this, not with the skyline glittering through glass walls, not with servers in tuxedos offering champagne flutes she couldn't pronounce, not with women who wore diamonds the size of rent checks. She shouldn't have been there. But one yes, one borrowed dress, one broken rule, had pulled her into a moment that would alter everything. And the man at the center of it all? He was supposed to be getting married to someone else. Ariel Monet wasn't the type of woman who said yes to chaos. She built her life on predictability, on quiet. She lived alone in a one-bedroom walk-up on 78th and 2nd. She knew the smell of burnt toast in the hall, the way her radiator clicked 3 times before it gave in to heat. Her closet held 2 pairs of heels, both 3 years old. Her best jacket was a thrifted blazer she only wore to interviews. She worked 2 jobs. By day she temped at the front desk of an interior design firm where she wasn't allowed to sit unless the boss left. By night, she served overpriced cocktails to underdressed investment bros on the rooftop of a midtown bar. Every hour was survival. Romance? It didn't fit in her world. She kept her head down. She avoided drama. The only men in her life were the ones who left tips, and they weren't offering anything she couldn't live without. "Come on, just this once," Mina begged, tugging on Ariel's wrist as they crossed the bodega. "No, it's invite only. Private rooftop club, billionaires, athletes, off-duty security outside. It's going to be insane." "Exactly. That's my nightmare," Mina groaned. "Girl, you are 27 and acting 60. You haven't gone anywhere in months. You don't party, you don't date. You barely text back. I'm working. You're surviving." There's a difference. That stopped her. Because Mina wasn't wrong. Ariel had forgotten what it felt like to live. Her mom's voice echoed in her head. A phrase she'd said every birthday, "Don't live so cautiously you forget to live at all." That's how it happened. One quiet night. One fine, but I'm leaving after an hour. That was the deal. Mina squealed like she'd won the lottery. Ariel didn't own a dress for the Ravel Club, so Mina lent her a deep plum one, with a slit too high and a neckline too low. Her curls fell around her collarbone. She used leftover eyeliner from a hotel sample bag, slipped on heels she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding. She looked at herself in the mirror before they left and whispered, "You don't belong there." But she still walked out the door. The Ravel Club wasn't on Google Maps. It had no website, no check-in desk, no signs. Just a black panel elevator in a midtown high-rise and a glass of champagne handed to you before the doors opened. Inside, walls of crystal, lights like starlight, floors that didn't echo. The men wore watches that cost more than her entire salary last year. The women moved like they were born for attention. Nobody looked out of place, except her. Mina disappeared into a group near the piano. Ariel stayed close to the balcony, eyes down, shoulders tense. She was halfway through her drink, ready to leave, when she felt it. A stare. He stood across the room, maybe 40 feet away. Tall, sharp jaw, no smile, loosened tie, cufflinks undone, a drink in hand he hadn't touched. Darian Vale. She recognized him instantly. Tech heir. Fortune magazine cover story last spring, known for his silent takeovers and scandal-free public image. Lately, he'd been splashed across every screen because of one thing, his engagement. He was supposed to marry the senator's daughter, socialite, polished, perfect. So why was he looking at her? No, staring. She turned to see if someone was behind her. There wasn't. She looked back. He hadn't moved. Ariel's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't attraction. It was stillness, like something had cracked the air between them. And then he started walking, slowly, intentionally, not through the crowd, around it. He weaved along the edge, eyes locked on her, not caring who noticed. Panic hit her chest. She didn't belong in his line of sight. He wasn't her world. And she didn't want to be some late-night curiosity for a man who lived in boardrooms and headlines. So she turned and headed for the exit. But she didn't get far. "Don't go," he said behind her, not loud, not desperate, just steady. She stopped, slowly turned. He was there, 6 feet away, hands empty, expression unreadable. "You don't know me," she said plainly. "I'd like to. I don't do games. I didn't ask you to." That stopped her, because his tone wasn't flirtation. It wasn't smooth. It was honest, real. "I just wanted a drink," she said. "There's better ones upstairs," he said, pointing toward the rooftop. She raised a brow. "You're inviting a stranger upstairs?" He shook his head. "No. I'm asking if you'll talk to me where it's quiet." Something in her chest softened. Minutes later, they stood alone under fairy lights. The music below was muted. The air was cool. A server brought them new drinks, then disappeared like smoke. Darian didn't sit close, didn't angle his body in that predatory way men often did. He gave her space and attention. They talked, not about money, not about headlines, about memories, books, the moment her dad left, the first time he lost someone, about why he feared failure more than death. Time blurred. At 3 a.m., she stood, brushing the hem of her dress. "I should go." He stood with her. "You don't know what you just did to me," he said. She blinked. "What did I do?" He hesitated. Jaw clenched. "You reminded me what I'm about to lose." Arel didn't respond. She didn't know how to. His words landed somewhere between a confession and a warning, and she wasn't sure which scared her more. She clutched her clutch bag tighter and turned toward the elevator without saying anything else. He didn't follow her this time. Back down in the main hall, the music was louder again. The crowd had thinned a bit. She spotted Mina dancing with someone near the center of the room, laughing, oblivious. Arel made her way to the coat check, handed over the claim ticket, and waited. Her heart beat faster than it should have. She didn't want to feel anything. She shouldn't have felt anything. But somehow that man, Darian Vale, had cut through every wall she'd built in 7 short hours. And the worst part, he didn't ask for her number. He didn't suggest seeing her again. He didn't try to kiss her. It was as if he knew they didn't belong in each other's worlds. Like he had already decided the moment was over. Final. Like he was telling her, this was all we get. She climbed into the back of a rideshare. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mina. "You left?" Arel didn't reply. She went home. She peeled off the dress, took off her makeup, sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the hardwood floor. She knew better than to believe in men like him. They were trained to say what women wanted to hear, but something in her gut said Darian wasn't trying to seduce her. He was trying to remember who he was. And maybe she'd helped, but she'd never know for sure. The next morning, she made black coffee, ironed her pants, and went back to work. Life didn't care what happened on a rooftop. 3 days passed. Mina begged for details, but Arel only offered one sentence. It was just a conversation. Then the headlines broke. A photo of Darian Vale in a cream suit, his arm around a sleek, poised woman in a gown made of gold satin. The caption read, "Darian Vale marries heiress socialite in private Napa ceremony." The air left Arel's lungs before she realized she'd stopped breathing. There it was. Final. He'd chosen. He already had. Probably long before that night. The article went on to praise the merger between Vale Technologies and a series of government contracts controlled by the bride's family. Arel didn't read to the end. She tossed her phone on the bed and stared at the ceiling. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd never let herself believe it was real to begin with. She wasn't angry at him. She wasn't even disappointed. She was disappointed in herself for wondering, for hoping, even for a second, that someone, like Darian Vale, would burn down his empire just to talk to someone like her. She went to work. She said nothing, and she tried, slowly, to forget. 2 weeks passed. The noise around the wedding faded. The gossip headlines moved on to another celebrity scandal. Arel returned to her routines. The rooftop bar, the design firm, the quiet evenings spent alone with second-hand novels and wine from screw-top bottles. She was fine. Until the envelope came. There was no knock, no mail slot, no neighbor to hand it off. It was just there, lying neatly in the center of her doormat. Black envelope, no return address. Her name written in clean, deliberate handwriting that made her stomach twist. She didn't open it right away. She stared at it for a long time. Finally, she slid her finger under the flap and pulled out a card. It was an invitation, not mass-printed. Custom-made. The crest at the top read, Vale Foundation, Annual Gala, Lincoln Building, 8 p.m., and on the back, a handwritten message. You left before I could explain. If you still want the truth, come. D. She sat on the floor, staring, reading it again and again. Her pulse kicked up. She told herself it was stupid to consider going. It was a trap, a bad idea, a way to invite disappointment into her life a second time. But the truth, she wanted to know. She wanted to hear him say it, whatever it was. She wanted to hear the lie from his lips, not through gossip blogs. Still, she waited 4 more days. On the 5th night, she stood in front of her closet and realized she'd already decided. She didn't tell Mina, didn't bring a friend. She went alone. The Lincoln Building was even more intimidating than the Ravel Club. It was made of glass and silence, the kind of place where people only spoke in whispers and wealth, walked without shoes. She stood at the elevator doors for a full minute, trying to talk herself out of it. Then they opened. She stepped inside. The 12th floor opened into a ballroom where everyone was beautiful, connected, powerful, or all three. A string quartet played in the background. Waiters carried champagne on circular trays like it was air. No one looked like her. Again, she almost turned around. But then, she saw him. He wasn't with anyone. He wasn't entertaining guests. He stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room as if he wasn't sure what he was looking for, until he saw her. Darian Vale moved across the floor like he didn't care who watched. He stopped a foot in front of her. She didn't speak first. He said, "I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think you'd invite me." His eyes held hers. "I didn't marry her for love." Her mouth tightened. "I figured that out." He looked down. It was business. Her father owns the contract that supports our AI platform. That marriage guaranteed a $1 billion rollout in 12 countries. She nodded slowly. "And you still said yes?" He raised his eyes. "I said yes 6 months ago. Before I met you. The words shouldn't have mattered, but they did." She folded her arms. "You could have walked away." "I almost did. I wanted to. But I was raised to think of empire first, to protect the name, the brand. I didn't know what I was walking away from until you showed up that night." She didn't move. "You could have called," she said flatly. "I knew if I saw you again, I'd destroy everything. I wasn't ready. And now," he swallowed, "now I can't sleep. I can't think straight. I look around and everything I've built feels like a cage, because I know the only moment I've felt like myself in years was on that rooftop with you." She felt her throat tighten, but she didn't let it show. "I don't trust men who suddenly find clarity after they've gotten everything they wanted," she said. "I didn't get what I wanted." Silence. They stood there between chandeliers and whispered politics, with everything unsaid sitting between them like a third person. She shook her head gently. "You don't get to fix this with one conversation. I know. You walked down the aisle. I know." She stepped back. "Good night, Mr. Vale." She turned and walked away before he could say another word. He didn't follow her this time either. Arel didn't cry in the car. She didn't even flinch. She sat still, eyes forward, hands folded in her lap, while the lights of Manhattan blurred past the window. Her mind was silent, but her body was tense. Her fingers curled so tight into her palm, they left faint crescent shapes on her skin. She hated how steady her face stayed. She wanted to be the kind of woman who stormed out of that building with righteous anger. She wanted to be furious, explosive, unbothered. But she wasn't. She was tired. She felt like something had been chipped loose inside her, and now she was trying to walk like she wasn't limping. When she got home, she kicked off her shoes without unbuckling them, let her bag fall on the couch, didn't even change out of the dress before she curled up in bed. She stared at the ceiling and felt a wave of something she couldn't name crash over her chest. He had chosen, then unchosen. But only after it was too late. Her phone buzzed. It was Mina. "Are you okay?" Arel didn't reply. Because how do you explain to someone that a man who was never yours somehow still broke your heart? The next day, she went back to work like nothing had happened. The design firm lobby was cold as usual, and the receptionist's chair squeaked every time she shifted. Her boss, Miss Klein, gave her the usual look of pleasant disinterest before disappearing behind frosted glass doors. The phone rang non-stop, and the cappuccino machine jammed again. By noon, she'd returned to her rhythm. By 3 p.m., she almost believed herself. Then her phone buzzed again. Blocked number. She let it ring. It buzzed a second time, then stopped. 30 minutes later, an email arrived. No subject, no signature. Just a line. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'd like to earn your time again." She stared at it, then deleted it. 2 more days passed. Another message. "I'm sorry for the cost. I'm not sorry I met you." Then, nothing. No more emails. No calls. No mysterious invitations. No gestures. Just quiet. Arel folded back into her life. It was safer that way. The fantasy had ended, and now she had to clean up the feelings it left behind. She didn't talk about it. Not even to Mina, who had long since stopped asking. Until the news broke. Vale Technologies had dropped 5% on the stock exchange. That wasn't a headline she'd normally notice, but it was on every feed that morning. Something about the senator's daughter pulling her family's contracts, legal disputes underway, boardroom tension, a leadership shake-up was expected. The article ended with a sentence that made her fingers go cold. Sources close to Vale say he's considering an annulment. She dropped her phone on the floor. No, she wasn't going to believe that. She wasn't going to let herself spiral into hope again. But the next day when she came home, there was a single white envelope taped to her apartment door. Her name, his handwriting. Inside, a note. No invitation this time. Just a sentence that made her sit down right there on the hallway floor. I ended it. She read it 3 times. No explanation, no defense, no pressure. Just those 3 words. She folded the paper slowly and held it in her lap. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just sat there, letting the silence wrap around her while the weight of it settled in. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to do next. That night, her phone rang. It was him. She almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something made her answer. She didn't speak first. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know I've said that already. I know it's not enough." She stayed silent. "I didn't end it for you. I ended it for me. Because I couldn't lie anymore. Because every day I stayed in that marriage, I felt further away from the person I was the night I met you." Arel exhaled. A slow, cautious breath. "I don't know what I'm asking for," he said. "I don't have a script. I don't have a plan. I just want to see you again. No expectations, no cameras, just us." "Where?" she asked. He hesitated. "There's a bookstore on 9th and Orchard. Quiet. Nobody goes there anymore. They have coffee and a table near the back." She nodded to herself. "I'll be there," he said. "Sunday at 4. She didn't say yes, didn't say no. She ended the call. Then she stared at the ceiling all night again, but for the first time, the weight in her chest didn't crush her. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing, but she knew she wasn't ready to close the door. Sunday came quietly. She wore a grey sweater dress and flats. No makeup, no jewelry. She didn't want to look like anything other than herself. When she arrived, he was already there. Jeans, a navy coat, hair slightly tousled. No guards, no staff. Just a man in a bookstore with 2 coffees and a paperback in his hand. When he saw her, he stood up but didn't smile. He looked nervous, uncertain. She liked that. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't." He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat. He handed her the coffee. Black, no sugar. Like at the Ravel Club. She arched a brow. "You remember that?" "I remember everything." They sat for a moment. The room felt too quiet, the air too still. Then he said, "I can't undo the wedding, I can't erase the headlines, but I can choose what I do next, and I choose you." Ariel didn't flinch. "I don't know what choosing me looks like for you," she said. "I don't come from money. I don't belong in rooms like you do. And I don't want to be the face next to you while people rip me apart online. I'm not asking you to be anything but you." She stared at him. "I'm not ready to be a headline," she said quietly. He nodded. "Then we stay in the shadows until you're ready." She blinked. "No pressure, no public claims, no photos. I'm not asking for now. I'm asking for real. Whenever that is." She reached for her coffee, sipped slowly. Then, without a word, she reached across the table and took his hand. It wasn't a commitment. It was a beginning. They didn't talk about the past. Not that day. They stayed at that table for nearly 2 hours. Sometimes speaking. Sometimes just watching each other in the soft, dim light of the bookstore cafe. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't cinematic. It was real. Two people trying to figure out how to sit across from each other, without the weight of headlines, mistakes, and silence crushing them. Darian didn't push. Ariel didn't volunteer. But with each sip, each shared smile, something subtle shifted. The tension thinned. The distance between them no longer felt impossible. It felt like a choice they were finally allowed to close. He paid for her second coffee, walked her outside, stood beside her under the fading daylight. "I don't want to make things complicated," he said as they reached the sidewalk. "They already are," she said softly. He nodded. "Then I don't want to make them worse." They stood still for a long time. People walked past without looking twice. For the first time, Darian Vale wasn't being followed by lenses or assistants or whispered rumors. He was just a man standing beside a woman he didn't know how to stop thinking about. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. She looked up. "Don't thank me yet." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then he turned and walked away, hands in his pockets. Ariel didn't move until his silhouette disappeared around the corner. The next few days passed like fog. She didn't hear from him. She didn't expect to. But on Wednesday, a small manila envelope arrived at the front desk of the design firm. Her name was written on the front. No note inside. Just a single item, a paperback copy of the book she'd mentioned on the rooftop that night. The one she said changed her life. Inside the front cover, in his handwriting, it read, "Page 82. That paragraph made me think of you, D." She turned to page 82. It was a line that hit her chest like a stone. "Some people enter your life not to stay forever, but to remind you what real feels like. And if you're lucky, they come back before you forget." She closed the book, put it on her nightstand, didn't message him. She didn't know what this was. She didn't know where it would lead, but it didn't feel like a trick. It didn't feel rushed or fake or dressed up. It felt like the beginning of something honest. 2 weeks later, he showed up at the rooftop bar. He wore a simple black coat, no tie. He asked for a table in the corner, alone. Ariel saw him before anyone else did. She froze for a second. The tray in her hands suddenly felt heavier. He didn't make a scene, didn't wave or call her over. He just waited. When she walked over, he stood, nodded once. "Hi, why are you here?" she asked, voice low. "To see you," he said. "And to leave if you ask me to." She stared at him. Her co-workers were already whispering behind the bar. "I don't have time to talk," she said. "Then don't talk. Just let me sit nearby." "That's a bad idea." Probably. She should have told him to leave. But she didn't. She brought his drink without asking what he wanted. He sat quietly, watched the view, never once pulled out his phone. When her shift ended at midnight, She stepped outside into the cold and found him leaning against the side of the building. "I didn't know how long your shift lasted," he said, "but I figured I'd wait." "You're ridiculous." He shrugged. "I've been called worse." She sighed. "You shouldn't be here." "I'll leave." "Good." She stepped past him, then turned. "Are you hungry?" He blinked. "Now?" She nodded. "There's a diner 2 blocks away. They serve bad pancakes and decent coffee." He smiled. "Lead the way." They sat at a chipped corner booth with a blinking neon sign above their heads. She ordered fries. He ordered pancakes. They split both. It wasn't a date. It wasn't anything. But it didn't need to be. They laughed for the first time in weeks. He reached across the table and wiped ketchup from her chin with a napkin. She let him. That night, when he walked her home, she didn't invite him in, but she lingered at her door. He leaned down, brushed a kiss across her cheek and whispered, "I'm glad I didn't miss my second chance." She closed the door behind her without saying a word. But inside, she smiled, and for the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. The next few weeks fell into an unspoken rhythm. He didn't overwhelm her. He didn't demand attention. He would check in, small texts, small gestures, nothing dramatic. And when they met, it was always private. No cameras. No threats to her peace. They walked through parks, shared food trucks, talked about their worst decisions and what scared them most about being seen. She started to trust him again. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. He didn't try to convince her. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just showed up, every time. One night, they sat in a small bar that played jazz in the corner. She rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I don't know what this is yet." "It doesn't have to be anything," he said. "I'm okay with now." She exhaled, long and slow. "Me too. If you've ever had someone quietly fight for you instead of beg for your attention, you know how rare that is. Comment your thoughts below. What matters more, the loud, grand gestures or the quiet, consistent ones? Let's talk about it. And don't forget to like and share if you're feeling the story. It keeps this channel growing. That weekend, Darian invited her to a quiet dinner at his new apartment. He no longer lived in the penthouse he once shared with his ex-fiancée. He'd moved into a smaller unit downtown. Fewer rooms, less staff, no distractions. She stepped inside and immediately noticed the change. No bodyguards, no assistants, just one man, 2 wine glasses, music playing low from a speaker on the counter. "You cook?" she asked. "I try," he said. It turned out he didn't. The chicken was dry, the pasta overcooked. She laughed so hard she nearly choked. "I spent 4 hours on this," he said with mock insult. "You need a refund. I'll take it up with my ego." After dinner, they sat on the couch, her legs over his lap, a blanket draped over their knees. He rubbed small circles into her calf. "I'm not trying to win you," he said quietly. "I'm just trying not to lose you. You're not losing me." She didn't say more than that, but he understood. It was the closest either of them had come to calling this what it really was, something new, something fragile, something real. He kissed her that night. Not rushed, not hungry, slow, careful, like she was something sacred. When she left, he didn't ask her to stay, but she knew she would come back. Arel stood in front of the mirror, brushing her curls back as morning sun spilled through the window. She wasn't dressing up, just jeans and a sweater, but something in her chest felt different, lighter. She hadn't felt this in months, maybe years. Her apartment, still small and drafty, didn't feel like it had changed. But she had. Somewhere between that bookstore meeting and last night's kiss, her walls had started to lower. Not fall, not collapse, just lower. Enough to breathe without bracing herself. Enough to want something again without apologizing for it. But that didn't mean she wasn't scared, because she still remembered the headlines. And her name had never been meant for lights. At the rooftop bar, people had started talking. Quiet whispers. Not cruel, just curious, about why Darian Vale had been there. Why he waited for her. Why he looked at her like he knew something the rest of the world hadn't caught up to yet. She tried to brush it off, but Mina noticed. You gonna tell me what's going on, or keep pretending your life's not turning into a novella? She asked one night while they closed out the till. Arel rolled her eyes. Nothing's going on. Liar. It's not serious. Girl. That man sat through 3 hours of mediocre live jazz and bad lighting just to drink tap water and talk about books with you. That's serious. It's not public. Yet. Arel looked away. Mina tilted her head. Are you protecting him or yourself? The question lingered, and she didn't answer it, because she wasn't sure. That weekend, she got a call from a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, it was Darian's younger sister, Camille. I know this is weird, Camille said, but I was wondering if you'd meet me. I wanted to talk to you, without him knowing. Arel blinked. Is something wrong? No. But I think you deserve to know a few things about who you're letting in. They met at a corner cafe in Soho. Camille arrived early, sat by the window, and wore no makeup. She didn't look like the rich girl Arel expected. She looked tired, but grounded. Thanks for meeting me, she said. I'm not sure what this is, Arel admitted. Camille stirred her coffee. He's different with you. I saw it the first time he came home after meeting you. He didn't say your name, but he wasn't himself. He was quiet in a way that didn't feel heavy, like he'd finally exhaled. Arel stayed still. Camille looked up. He wasn't raised to choose happiness. He was raised to maintain legacy. My father was never around, and our mother only smiled for photographers. Darian took on the role of being everything for everyone before he turned 20. She paused. That wedding, it wasn't about love. It was an arrangement, one that made sense, one that pleased everyone but him. I know, Arel said softly. Camille studied her. He won't say this to you because he thinks it makes him weak, but he broke down the night he filed for annulment. I found him in his office with the lights off. Said he was tired of pretending that peace and power were the same thing. Arel felt her throat tighten. Camille leaned forward. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for him. I'm telling you because I've seen him lie to the world for so long. I forgot he was capable of choosing truth. She reached into her bag, pulled out a thin envelope. He wrote something that night. I shouldn't be showing you this, but I want you to see who he is when no one's watching. Arel hesitated, then took it. She opened the flap. Inside was a single page of notebook paper. No signature, no formatting, just a paragraph, written in fast, slanted handwriting. I don't want to be remembered for numbers, for mergers, for controlling rooms. I want to be remembered by one person who says, he made me feel safe. If I can give that to her, I'll have lived a life worth something. Arel folded it back. Camille whispered, please don't break him just because the world tried to. Arel shook her head slowly. I'm not planning to break anyone. They didn't talk much after that. But when they hugged goodbye, it felt like the kind of hug passed between two women who had lived on the edges of powerful men and knew the cost of it. That night, Darian didn't text her. He didn't know they'd met. She lay in bed staring at the paper again, reading that paragraph over and over, and for the first time, she realized something. She wasn't the only one who'd needed saving. The next time they met, it was at a gallery downtown. He'd reserved a private walkthrough, saying he thought she'd like the space. It was quiet, minimalist, art that didn't beg for attention but earned it. Halfway through, she turned to him. You wrote something that night, she said. He blinked. What? The night you filed for annulment. Camille showed me. His eyes shifted. She shouldn't have done that. No, she should have. She stepped closer. You said you wanted to be remembered for making one person feel safe. His throat moved. You already did, she said. He didn't say anything, but his hand reached for hers, slow and gentle, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to hold it. She let him. If love had a sound, it was that moment of silence. The days that followed moved gently. Arel and Darian didn't rush into declarations. They didn't stage anything. There were no big posts, no dramatic dinners. Their connection unfolded in the quiet spaces, walking through bookstores, cooking together, texting mid-shift, meeting in between responsibilities like two people who weren't trying to prove something, just understand it. He kept showing up, never flashy, never loud, but always present. He brought her lunch when she had back-to-back shifts, left a sticky note in the bag that said, "Don't forget to eat." She found a playlist he sent her one night after she said she missed hearing old jazz in her childhood home. The next morning, he texted a link titled, "For the girl who said music used to mean something." He never tried to impress her with money. He showed her effort instead, and slowly, her guard lowered further. But the world wasn't blind. Someone snapped a photo of them leaving the gallery. It ended up on a gossip site 2 days later. The headline wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. Darian Vale spotted with mystery woman, not his ex-fiancée. Arel saw it by accident. Someone at the bar left their phone open with the article on screen. Her stomach flipped. She excused herself to the back hallway and leaned against the wall, heart pounding. This wasn't the life she signed up for. She didn't want to be the woman people whispered about. He called before she even got home. "I'm so sorry," he said the moment she answered. "I didn't plan for this." "I know," she replied. "I never wanted you dragged into my world. And I swear I've tried to keep us off the radar. You don't have to explain." "I do," he insisted, voice firm but calm. "Because what happens next matters. And I want you to know I won't let this get ugly." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "I'm not scared of attention. I'm scared of losing my peace." He didn't argue. Instead, he said, "Then let's go quiet again. We don't have to do this in public. I'll wait until you're ready." She didn't expect that, and maybe that was why she believed him. The photo didn't go viral. A few comments came and went, but nothing stuck. The world moved on quickly, distracted by something louder. Still, she stayed cautious. One morning, she came downstairs to find a small brown paper bag hanging on her door handle. Inside was a warm croissant from her favorite spot, a bottle of mango juice, and a napkin with his handwriting. "You said you hadn't had breakfast in 3 days. Thought I'd help." No name, no demand, no pressure. Just him, showing up. She texted, "This is too much." He replied, "Then I'll slow down. But I won't stop." They went 3 days without speaking. She needed the space. He gave it. When she reached out again, it wasn't with a question. It was with a photo, an old record store they'd once talked about visiting. His reply came 10 seconds later. "Tomorrow, 6. They went, and this time, they didn't avoid the things that scared them. "I don't know how to be with someone in your world," she admitted, fingers running across a row of dusty vinyl sleeves. "Then we build a new one," he said, pulling out a Miles Davis album. "Our own version. You really think we can keep it untouched?" "I think we can keep it honest." She smiled. "That's harder." Good things usually are. They walked home under dim city lights. No cars, no eyes, just them, and the quiet hum of a street lamp above. At her door, he hesitated. She looked up. "What?" He rubbed the back of his neck, nervous. "I know it's early, but I want to ask you something. You're making that face like it's serious." He chuckled. "It's not dramatic. I want to meet your mom." Arel blinked, then laughed softly. "You don't even know where she lives. Then tell me. I'm ready to show her who I am before the rest of the world tries to tell her." She nodded slowly, sobering. "That's not a small thing. I'm not a small gesture kind of man. No, you're not." She leaned up, kissed his cheek and whispered, "I'll think about it." That weekend, she did. Her mother, Rosalind, lived in New Jersey. A quiet woman with sharp intuition and little tolerance for nonsense. If Darian was going to fold into Arel's life, meeting her mother would be a test. He couldn't fail quietly. Arel warned him, "She won't be impressed by your money, or your charm." "I'm not trying to impress her," he said, "just hoping she sees I'm serious." They made the trip on a Sunday afternoon. Her mom's house was small, clean, with roses by the front porch and wind chimes that clinked like soft warnings. Rosalind opened the door, eyes going straight to Darian's. "You're early," she said. "I was nervous," he admitted. "Good. Means you're human." She stepped aside. The visit was awkward at first. Darian tried too hard. Rosalind barely spoke. But after 30 minutes, the edge softened. Darian talked about his childhood, his fears, the mistakes he'd made. He didn't use big words. He didn't talk business. He told her the story of the night he met RL and how he didn't sleep for a week afterward because of what he didn't say. Rosalind stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "She's my only child," she said. "She didn't come easy. And she's grown up in a world where trust is a rare currency. Don't spend it if you're not ready to earn it back." "I understand," he said. "And I know you're kind," she added. He tilted his head. "What kind is that?" "The kind that always believes the world will adjust to them. But this time, it won't. If you want her, you'll have to learn how to adjust to her." "I want to." "Then don't mess this up." He didn't smile, didn't thank her. He just nodded, and that was enough. When they left, Rosalind gave her daughter a long, wordless hug at the door. "Call me tomorrow," she whispered. "I will." And for the first time in years, Irel felt like two pieces of her life had touched without shattering each other. The visit to her mother's house changed something, not in some loud, cinematic way. There were no fireworks or sudden revelations. But after that Sunday, Irel noticed the difference. Darian was more patient, more grounded. He didn't reach for his phone during conversations. He asked deeper questions. He listened longer. It was like meeting her mother had pulled him closer to earth. And it pulled them closer too. They didn't define what they were. No titles, no social media, just presence. They met often, but not every day. Enough to miss each other in between. Enough to stay curious. One night, she arrived at his apartment holding takeout. Chinese, 2 cartons, 3 egg rolls, and a bag of fortune cookies. He opened the door barefoot, sleeves rolled up, reading glasses still on. "You wear glasses?" "When I read," he said, a little embarrassed. "Don't take them off." He kept them on. They sat on the floor, ate straight from the containers, talked about everything except work. He asked her what her favorite childhood toy was. She told him about the teddy bear she'd named Officer Marshmallow and how she cried when she lost it at a laundromat. He laughed so hard he choked on his drink. She wiped his chin with a napkin and shook her head. "You're not slick, Darian Vale. You just look like it." That night, they kissed again. This time, it didn't feel cautious. It felt certain. He asked her to stay. She said yes. They lay in bed, side by side. Not tangled, not rushed. Just skin against skin, warmth shared in silence. His hand rested on her back. Her fingers curled into his chest. There were no expectations, no demands, no masks. And in that quiet she whispered, "I'm scared." He didn't ask why. He simply kissed the top of her head and said, "Me too." In the morning, she woke before him. She stood by the window, looking out at the city. The sun had barely risen. The streets were soft and slow. Behind her he stirred, then wrapped the blanket around himself and sat up, watching her in silence. "You're beautiful like this," he said. She turned. Like what? Unbothered, bare, real. She walked back to the bed, slid under the covers again. He pulled her close. That day, he cancelled all his meetings. They spent the afternoon in hoodies and socks, watching old black and white movies on his projector. She fell asleep halfway through one. He didn't wake her, just tucked a blanket under her chin and turned the volume down. When she woke, he was gone from the couch. She sat up, dazed, then noticed the smell of food. In the kitchen, he was burning eggs. She leaned on the doorway, arms crossed. "You really can't cook, can you?" "I have strengths in other areas," he said. "Thank God." She walked over, took the pan from his hands, and fixed the mess. They laughed, side by side, bumping hips, stealing bites. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't glamorous. But it was theirs. Later that evening, they walked hand in hand through Central Park. No disguises. No guards. She thought he might keep it hidden, but he didn't. And that made her trust him even more. But peace never stays untouched for long. They reached a bench near the lake. Sat down. Talked about the future for the first time. "I don't know where this is going," she said. "I'm not asking for promises. But I need to know you're not going to disappear when things get messy." He looked at her, steady. "I'll stay," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "Don't say what sounds good. Say what's real." He leaned closer. "I stayed in a lie for too long. Now I want a truth that might be harder, but worth it. That's you." She didn't respond with words. She kissed him instead. They sat in that kiss for a long time, the noise of the city muffled around them. But as the sun dropped lower, something interrupted the stillness. A woman walked by. She didn't stop. She didn't speak. But she looked, and snapped a photo. Ariel saw it happen. Darian didn't. By the time she processed it, the woman was gone. She said nothing. They finished the walk. Took a cab back to his place. She didn't mention the photo. He kissed her goodbye at the door like nothing had shifted. But inside, her stomach turned, because she knew what was coming, and she wasn't ready for it. The next morning, it started. Someone tagged her in a comment under a celebrity gossip page. She didn't click it. She didn't have to. The photo had surfaced. Low quality, slightly blurred, but unmistakably them, on a bench, mouths pressed together, holding hands. The caption read, "Looks like Darian Vale's quiet season is over. Who's the mystery girl?" Her heart sank. She turned off her notifications. By the time she reached work, it was worse. 2 more gossip sites picked it up. One of them had pulled an old photo of her from a work directory and added it next to his, with bullet points listing what little they could dig up: temp worker, low-income background, New York resident, unknown ties to the tech world. Mina called twice. Ariel didn't answer. She sat at the reception desk, frozen, unsure if she was going to throw up or cry. This was the part she feared. Not because she was ashamed, but because she knew the world didn't treat women like her with mercy. She didn't text Darian. Not that morning. Not that afternoon. She needed space to think. Every second her phone lit up with notifications she didn't check. Mentions. DMs. Comments she didn't want to see. She avoided the headlines, but the whisper of them still reached her. Mystery girl from Lenox Hill. Is Darian Vale slumming for love? From cocktails to kisses, who is Ariel Monet? She could feel the pressure building, not from his world, but from the weight of being exposed without armor. By her lunch break, she'd locked her phone in her desk drawer just to breathe. Mina found her hiding in the break room, chewing dry cereal from a mug. "You okay?" she asked gently. Ariel shook her head. "I didn't ask for this." "No, but he did. He kissed you in public. I thought it was just a moment. It was a moment. But for people like him, moments are never just that. Someone's always watching." Ariel pressed her fingers to her temples. Mina sat beside her. "Do you want him to fix this?" "I don't know if he can." "Then what do you want?" Ariel stared down at the mug. "I want to breathe without feeling like I'm being hunted." She didn't go to his apartment that night. She turned off her phone and slept at her mom's. The next morning, Rosalind made her tea and didn't ask questions. Just placed the cup in front of her daughter and slid a small folded newspaper across the table. Ariel didn't want to read it, but she did. Front page of the business section, Vale releases statement defending new relationship. She owes you nothing. Her chest tightened as she read the quote beneath it. If you're looking for a scandal, keep moving. She's not a headline. She's a human being. She has no PR team, no legacy ties, no political backdoor. She's just real, and that's the most powerful thing I've ever stood beside. Rosalind looked over her glasses. He said that on camera. Ariel's lips parted slightly. Her mother added, "I don't like rich men who think sincerity is a campaign." But that sounded real. Ariel didn't say anything, not yet. When she got back to her apartment that evening, A package was waiting at her door. She opened it slowly. Inside, a hoodie. Soft grey, no branding, just clean and warm. Tucked into the sleeve, a note. No pressure, no noise. Just come over when you're ready. The door's open, and so am I. She sat with it in her lap. Then she got up, changed, pulled the hoodie on, and left. When she arrived at his building, the concierge already knew to let her up. She didn't knock. She walked in. He stood in the kitchen, cooking, badly. She leaned against the wall. "You have a habit of burning things." He turned, startled, then relaxed. "I was hoping you'd come. You shouldn't have made that statement. I had to." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did, because I can live with business fallout, but I won't live with people dragging you like you're a punchline. You deserve better." She stepped closer. "You don't get to decide how the world sees me, even if you mean well." He looked down. "I know, but," she added, "you do get points for trying." He smiled, relief subtle but real. "I brought wine," he said. "Of course you did. And ice cream. You're lucky I was raised not to waste food." They sat together, ate burned pasta again, talked less this time, but listened more. When she leaned into him on the couch, he wrapped his arm around her and said quietly, "I don't need the world to understand us. I just need you not to disappear." "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "I'm just still learning how to stand in the light without flinching." He nodded. "I'll stand with you." She didn't say thank you. She just rested her head on his chest and listened to the sound of someone who kept choosing her, even when the world had an opinion. And for the first time since the photo surfaced, she didn't feel like she was drowning in noise. She felt like she was learning how to be seen and survive it. Ariel had never been followed before, not in the dangerous sense. But now, every step outside her apartment came with extra eyes. 2 women stared too long near the bus stop. A man snapped a picture at the cafe and pretended he was texting. Her grocery run ended with someone filming her from across the parking lot. They never said anything, but they didn't have to. The gaze of curiosity burns even louder when no one speaks. She kept her head down. Dark sunglasses, no makeup, headphones in, no music playing, just enough to create a shield. She didn't tell Darian, not yet. She didn't want to sound fragile. She didn't want to give him more to fix. But when she walked into the bar that night, 2 girls at table 9 whispered loud enough for her to hear. She's the reason his ex backed out, probably knew what she was doing. Ariel stood still. She wasn't going to cry. Not at work. Not in front of strangers who only knew the version of her that fit their theories. She took their order, then walked to the back room and locked the door. She stared at the mirror above the sink. Her reflection stared back, tired, calm, firm. They didn't know her. They didn't know the hours she worked, the losses she carried, the way she never once dreamed of chasing anyone with a title or a company behind his name. She didn't ask for any of this, but now she had to decide what to do with it. When her shift ended, Darian was waiting downstairs in his car. She didn't ask how he knew. He opened the door. She got in. He didn't say a word. Neither did she, until the light turned red and she whispered, "They're starting to talk." His grip on the steering wheel tightened. She added, "Not just about me, about her, about you. They're turning it into something it never was." He exhaled slowly. "Then maybe we should say what it was. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't mean a press release. I mean between us." She turned to him. "You walked away from something massive," she said, "and the world's trying to punish you for it. I don't want to be the reason you keep bleeding." He looked over. "You're not the reason," he said. "You're the recovery." She stayed quiet. Back at his apartment, she kicked off her shoes and walked barefoot through the kitchen while he poured 2 glasses of water. He handed her one, and she leaned against the counter. He studied her. "Talk to me. I didn't think I'd ever be this visible," she said. "And now that I am, I don't know how to be soft in public." "You don't have to be soft. You just have to be honest." She met his eyes. "Then here's the truth. I'm falling for you, and I'm scared." He stepped closer. Then fall, he said. I'll catch you. She didn't smile, didn't blink. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him like she was trusting him with the most dangerous part of herself. And he kissed her back, like he knew how to hold it without breaking it. They didn't go to bed right away. They sat on the couch, her legs curled under her, his hand resting gently on her knee. The city buzzed beyond the glass, but inside that apartment, it was still. He looked at her with a mix of wonder and pain. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met that night? She nodded. I probably would have just gone home, back to my routines, my silence, and I would have made the worst decision of my life and pretended it didn't bother me. Do you regret it? Meeting you. She shook her head. Walking down that aisle. His voice dropped. Every day, she studied him. I don't regret the fallout, he said. I regret that I waited until someone like you came along to realize how empty it all was. She whispered, it wasn't your fault. It was. I said yes to a life that didn't fit just because it was tailored for me. She slid her hand into his. I'm glad you outgrew it. He leaned in, kissed her again, slower this time. Longer. Like he was anchoring himself to her mouth, her presence, her yes. They didn't make love that night. They just held each other. And that was more intimate than anything else they could have done. Morning came slow. Arel woke first. The curtains were drawn just enough for sunlight to slide across the floor in stripes. She stretched quietly, careful not to wake him. Darian slept on his side, one hand tucked under the pillow, his breathing deep and even. He looked different in sleep, younger, less sharp, like the weight of legacy and press releases didn't follow him into dreams. She reached over, touched his wrist gently. He stirred, eyes opened halfway. He smiled. You stayed. She nodded, lips brushing into a smile of her own. I made eggs, she said. He blinked. How bad are they? I didn't burn anything. Miracle. She stood, pulled his robe around her shoulders, and walked toward the kitchen. He sat up, watching her, watching the way she moved through his space without hesitance now. They sat together on bar stools, eating off the same plate. She dipped toast in yolk. He sipped coffee like he hadn't slept that well in months. What's your biggest fear? She asked out of nowhere. He didn't flinch. Losing everything. I left the wrong things behind to protect. She tilted her head. Explain. He set his fork down. I've spent most of my life climbing a ladder I didn't build. My name opened doors, but it also came with blueprints, who I should love, how I should act, what legacy to protect. When I stepped off that ladder, I expected freedom. But there's still a part of me that's afraid I gave up the safety net for a truth that might not survive under pressure. She looked at him for a long time, then said, You're not alone in that. He reached over, gently tapped her ring finger. No pressure, no timelines, but one day, if this keeps growing the way it is, I'll want more. I know. And I want that more to be real. Not branded, not published, not marketable. She nodded. Same. After breakfast, she got dressed slowly, folding each item with care. He offered to drive her back. She declined. I want to walk. Are you sure? There might be. Let them look, she said, tying her hair up. I'm done hiding. He didn't argue. Instead, he stepped behind her and placed his hands on her shoulders. Kissed the top of her head. I'll see you tonight? Only if you cook something I can actually eat. No promises. She left. On the street, the breeze was cooler than she expected. Her coat wasn't enough, but she kept walking. She didn't rush. She didn't duck. People passed, glanced, kept moving. One woman did a double take. Arel held her head high and kept walking. She was learning how to exist outside invisibility. And it wasn't easy, but it was honest. Later that day, she got a text from Mina, girl. You're trending again, but this time, it's different. Arel didn't check it immediately. She walked to the park instead, sat on a bench, watched a little boy feed pigeons with his grandmother. Then finally she opened her phone. A clip from a podcast had gone viral. Darian was the guest, not a flashy one, just a quiet sit-down about entrepreneurship and leadership. But in the last 2 minutes, the host had asked a personal question. Is there anyone in your life right now you're protecting? He'd paused, smiled a little. There is, but not in the way you think. She's not some fragile secret. She's just someone I'm not willing to sacrifice to people's assumptions. The host laughed. That sounds serious. It is. Do we get to know her name? No. But I'll say this, she makes me a better man. And if the cost of peace is being misunderstood by strangers, I'll take that over losing her any day. Irel's hand shook slightly. She closed the app, looked up at the sky, let herself breathe. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was something better, real, hard-earned, raw. She stayed in the park until the sun dipped, then walked home slowly, feeling less afraid of being seen. That night, she cooked. Badly. But Darian showed up anyway, arms full of dessert and cheap wine. They didn't talk about the clip. They didn't need to. Instead, they sat on the floor again, shoulder to shoulder, legs stretched across the carpet. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever wish we met under different circumstances?" He thought for a moment, then said, "No, because if we had, I might have still been the wrong version of myself." She leaned into him. "Thank you for choosing peace over power." He turned to her. "I didn't choose peace. I chose you." Darian didn't walk into the boardroom like a man defeated. He walked in like a man ready to let the empire burn, if it meant protecting what he'd rebuilt outside of it. The conference room on the 40th floor of Vale Global's Midtown headquarters had never seen him like this. No suit, no tie, just a charcoal sweater and rolled sleeves. His assistant tried to hand him a schedule as he entered. He waved it off. The board members looked confused until he spoke. "I'm stepping down." 5 words. The room fell still. No one laughed. No one interrupted, because the tone in his voice didn't invite debate. Temporarily, he clarified. "Effective this quarter." One of the older members at the end of the table, Holloway, his father's longest-running partner, leaned forward. "May we ask, why?" Darian met his eyes. "Because I refuse to let this company dictate who I'm allowed to care for." Someone else cleared their throat. "Mr. Vale, respectfully, your relationship with MS Monet is causing ripple effects in media and investor confidence. Stepping back now may signal weakness." "No," Darian cut in. "It signals freedom." He looked around the room. Men and women who had known him since his 20s. People who'd only ever seen the curated version. "I've been playing by rules that weren't mine for years," he said, "and I nearly made the biggest mistake of my life trying to please headlines. I won't do it again." "But this company," someone began. "This company," Darian interrupted, "has survived worse than a CEO taking time to decide what kind of man he wants to be. If your confidence in me is so fragile it can't survive truth, then I should have left years ago." Silence again. He stood taller, not defensive, just calm. "I'll return when I've rebuilt what matters, and if you need to find someone else in the meantime, I won't stand in the way." He turned and walked out. No applause, no arguments, just the sound of him choosing his peace over their pressure. Back in the elevator, his hands trembled. He didn't regret it, but it still shook him. Because letting go of a legacy, even temporarily, feels like amputating a name that was sewn into your spine since childhood. He didn't go home that night. He went to her. Irel opened the door before he knocked. She knew something had shifted. She saw it in his eyes, the restraint in his voice. "I left the company," he said. She blinked. "You what?" "Not permanently, just for now." "Why?" He stepped in, closed the door behind him, and exhaled. "Because I've never said no to them before, and I needed to know I still could." She studied him for a moment, then wrapped her arms around his waist. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "I feel hollow." She pulled back, reached for his hand, led him to the couch. They sat in silence. No TV, no music, just shared breath and dim light. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Not yet." Okay. She curled against him. Sometimes love sounds like nothing, just stillness, just presence. The next morning, he woke before her. She was sprawled across the bed, hair in a pillow-snatched mess, breathing even. He didn't want to move. He watched her for a long time, memorizing the way her cheek pressed into the mattress, how her hand reached slightly for his space, as if she felt him even in sleep. When she stirred, he whispered, "I did something scary." "You already told me," she mumbled. He smiled. "It still feels scary." She rolled over, opened one eye. "You look like someone who needs a walk and a bagel." Accurate. They threw on layers and wandered down the block. No press, no cameras. Just the sound of the city waking up. They ate in the park. He fed a squirrel. Badly. She laughed. By noon, he looked like a man who hadn't just dropped the weight of an entire empire. But inside, he was still untangling what came next. Later that day, she went in to work for her weekend shift. Mina grabbed her by the arm behind the bar. "You didn't tell me he stepped down. I only found out last night." "Girl, you are in deeper than I thought." RL exhaled. "That's not why I'm with him. I know that." "Do you?" "Yes." "Good. Because the internet's already doing that thing again." RL pulled out her phone during break, opened the latest article. Vale's departure linked to relationship with unknown girlfriend. Sources say she changed his life overnight. She rolled her eyes. The story was less cruel than expected, but still written like she was a problem he had to answer for. When she got back to his place that night, he was cooking. Better this time. Stir-fry, fresh rice, actual seasoning. "You're learning," she teased. He grinned. "I'm motivated." They ate by the window. The view of the skyline now felt like a different city, one where she belonged, not as an ornament, but as herself. After dinner, he said, "I want to show you something." He led her to the office. On the desk, a folder. Inside it, drawings, sketches, concepts, blueprints. She flipped through them slowly. "What is this?" "A foundation," he said. "I want to create a tech incubator for underrepresented voices. Startups from communities that never get heard. Build from scratch. No old names attached." She looked up. "You're starting over?" "I'm building something that doesn't need a name to matter." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're brave." He shook his head. "I'm following the right voice." Finally, she set the folder down and walked to him. "Where do I fit in?" she asked. He wrapped his arms around her. "Right here. Beside me." Darian didn't sleep that night. Not because of anxiety, but because his mind wouldn't stop working. It wasn't about the boardroom anymore. It was about RL, about what their story could look like without noise, without apology. He spent hours sketching, writing notes, building the early bones of his new venture, the kind of company that didn't just talk about impact, but made space for voices that had never sat at the table. He kept thinking about how RL looked at him that night. Not impressed, not overwhelmed, just proud. It did something to him. The next morning, she came over carrying a coffee tray and a breakfast sandwich tucked in foil. He opened the door, shirt wrinkled, hair messy. She looked at him. "You didn't sleep." "Not much. I brought food." "You're magic." They sat on his balcony. Cold wind, warm hands, the kind of silence that only existed between people who didn't need to prove anything anymore. He handed her a sketch pad. She raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "My next chapter." She flipped through it. Diagrams, notes, potential names. She paused on one, the core. Beneath it, a venture fund for the people closest to the problem. She looked up. "This is good. It's missing something." "What?" "You." She blinked. He explained softly. "This doesn't work unless it's built with the kind of voice that knows what it means to be underestimated. Someone who's lived the grind, felt invisible, chosen not to play the game but still knows how to win it. You think that's me?" "I know it is." She sat back. "I serve drinks, Darian." "No, you observe people, you anticipate, You build loyalty in 2 minutes with strangers, you read between silences, you listen, and you don't perform. You exist. That's power. She looked away for a moment. Is this a real offer? It's the only one I've made that matters. She smiled slowly. Then I'll think about it. Take your time. He kissed her forehead. Later that day, while she worked her evening shift, he stopped by with flowers. He didn't come inside, just waited outside until she had a moment to slip out through the staff door. She saw him, shook her head. You're getting good at this. I've been practicing. She took the flowers, lilies and wild roses. Thank you, she said. I wanted to tell you something, he said. Okay. I used to think power was in being untouchable, but I'm learning it's in being known, and letting the right person see you is the strongest thing I've ever done. She stared at him, not because she didn't believe him, but because hearing it out loud undid something inside her. He took a step closer. If I asked you to build a life with me, not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, would you consider it? Is this your weird way of proposing? No, he said. But it's a warning that I might. She leaned up, kissed him quick. Good. Just give me time to pick the dress. If you've ever had someone see your worth before the world did, you know how rare that is. Tell us in the comments, would you build something new for love, even if it meant burning what was comfortable? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story is speaking to you. Ariel didn't give an answer right away. She let a few days pass. Let the reality of everything settle in. She still worked both jobs, still took the subway, still folded laundry in her living room while the news whispered in the background. But now, when she moved through the city, she wasn't just surviving. She was preparing. One night, she called him. I want in. On what? Your next chapter. He didn't ask her to repeat it. He just said, meet me at the old firehouse on 6th and Leonard. Midnight. She showed up in a hoodie and jeans. The building was dark except for one light. Inside, a dusty space, open walls, concrete floors. He stood in the center. This is it, he said. You're buying this. I already did. For what? For us. For the core. For every person who's ever been left out of a room because they didn't wear the right watch. She walked through the space. High ceilings, brick walls. I like it, she said. He came up behind her, slid his arms around her waist. So you're in? I'm in. He didn't kiss her then. He just held her. Because some answers are louder in silence. That weekend, they started building. He took meetings with developers and contractors. She worked on vision boards, name research, user feedback plans. They mapped out community needs, found artists to design the space, started outreach. She even introduced him to a childhood friend who once pitched an app no one would fund. Darian listened, then offered her the first seed check of the project. Word spread fast, but this time the noise was good. The core wasn't flashy. It wasn't backed by major VC names. It was personal, and that made people curious. By the end of the month, they had 12 applications and a press request from a major podcast. Ariel turned it down. We're not ready yet, she told Darian. He smiled. You sound like a founder, she smirked. Maybe the first, he pulled her close. I've always known. They stood in the middle of a place they were building with their hands and their hearts, and for once, both of them felt like they were finally standing on solid ground. Ariel hadn't expected to enjoy leadership. She thought it would feel heavy, formal, like she was stepping into shoes that didn't fit. But when she stood in that raw brick space beside Darian, wearing sneakers, no makeup, holding a clipboard, it felt like she was finally walking barefoot in her own story. They worked side by side every day. No titles, no scripts, just two people trying to prove that you could build something meaningful without following the rules designed to keep people out. The core wasn't open yet, but it already buzzed with promise. A young woman named Jada came by 3 times a week to rehearse her pitch for a community-based finance tool. A web designer who'd been rejected by every major agency now had a desk in the corner, scribbling mock-ups on a whiteboard while eating potato chips for lunch. A kid with a stutter wanted to launch a storytelling platform for children like him. Darian listened to every word without blinking. And Ariel? She handled the small fires, printer jams, broken Wi-Fi, team dynamics. But more than that, she made people feel safe. She remembered birthdays, brought snacks, rearranged the space to make it more human, less sterile. And when investors started circling, it was her they wanted to hear from. Not because of her resume, but because her presence gave the place soul. "You're the core of the core," one of the engineers said quietly one night after a late work session. Ariel didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded. Later, when she and Darian left the building together, he noticed something in her face. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just thinking. About." She looked up at him. "I've never been seen like this before." He stopped walking. "Then let me be clear," he said. "I didn't fall for you because of potential. I fell because you were already complete. The world's just catching up." She looked away, swallowing the emotion. He pulled her into his chest, and in the quiet of that sidewalk, she whispered, "I think I'm falling back." "Good," he said. "It's safe here." But things were never that simple. 2 days later, his ex-fiancée went public. A statement, a feature in a high-profile magazine, carefully crafted. She didn't attack him. She didn't mention Ariel by name. But the narrative was clear. Sometimes we lose people to choices they don't know how to make, and we forgive them, but we don't follow them. It trended for hours. Ariel saw it when she woke up. She stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry, not jealous, just tired, because she didn't want to be the villain in someone else's version of the story. She got dressed in silence, went to the core without saying a word about it. Darian showed up an hour later. He looked tense. "Did you see it?" She nodded. "Everyone saw it." He hesitated. "She didn't use your name. She didn't have to." He moved closer. "Do you want me to say something?" "No." He paused. "Do you want me to do something?" She looked at him, then said quietly, "I want you to keep building this with me, and I want you to stop acting like every story needs to be defended. Let it be what it is. We know what's true." His shoulders dropped. She wasn't asking for rescue. She was asking for peace. And he could give her that. That evening, they didn't talk about it again. Instead, they sat on the rooftop of the building with pizza and wine in plastic cups. He traced circles on her knee while the sun fell over the city. She looked out at the skyline, then said, "I used to think love meant someone fighting your battles for you." He waited. "But now I know it means someone standing behind you while you fight your own." He smiled. "So what does that make me?" She leaned into him. Home. They didn't need titles to know where they stood. At night, Ariel slept better in his bed than she ever had in her own. Not because the sheets were softer or the mattress more expensive, but because she wasn't carrying her whole life on her back anymore. She was sharing it with someone who didn't flinch when it got heavy. She had her own key now. He didn't make a moment of it. He just handed it to her one morning before heading out. "No pressure," he said. "Just access." She didn't say anything. But that evening, she came over without calling. And when she found him asleep on the couch with his laptop open and a folder of contracts beside him, she smiled quietly. She shut the folder, plugged in his phone, turned off the lights, then curled up beside him and pulled the blanket over them both. In the morning, he woke with her hand on his chest. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Miss what?" "The other life." He opened his eyes slowly. "No. I just wish I'd had the courage to leave it sooner. Even the control." "The convenience?" "I didn't have control. I had a schedule. And convenience is nothing if it keeps you locked in a version of yourself you've outgrown." She nodded, then said, "I like the version that remembers to bring me chocolate croissants on Thursdays." He smiled. "Damn. I forgot today was Thursday." She kissed his cheek. Redemption possible tomorrow. The core was finally taking shape. Paint on the walls. Glass doors installed. furniture arriving in mismatched pieces that they assembled themselves, often swearing under their breath with Allen wrenches in hand. Darian was terrible at instructions. Arel was the queen of improvising. Together, they made a strange but effective team. More startups applied. Local media took notice. But this time, the coverage wasn't about him. It was about them. Articles started naming her directly. Arel Monet, the heart behind the core. A write-up called her the woman reintroducing soul to Silicon Alley. She didn't know what to do with the attention. She wasn't built for spotlights. But when a young black girl stopped her outside the building and said, "I didn't know someone who looked like us could run places like this," she stopped feeling awkward about it. She hugged that girl, and she went back inside with new fire. Darian watched her move through the office that afternoon, confident, calm, leading without needing to dominate, and something in him clicked. He didn't just love her. He admired her. That night, he took her to dinner. Not a rooftop, not a 5-star, just a quiet little jazz restaurant downtown, candlelit, nothing flashy, no reservations needed. Halfway through the second course, he reached across the table and slid something small into her hand. Not a ring, a silver pin, engraved CO founder, the core. She looked at him, eyes wide. "I know you don't care about titles," he said, "but you deserve to see your name in the foundation, not behind it." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You already made me part of it. I want to make it official." She held the pin between her fingers. "I never thought I'd belong in anything like this." "You didn't just belong," he said. "You built it." She leaned forward and kissed him. Not because of the gesture, but because he always knew how to see her in the ways that mattered. They walked home under a soft night sky. No cameras, no whispers. When they got back to his apartment, she sat on the counter while he poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one. "What?" she asked when she noticed him watching her. "I keep thinking about the first night I saw you." She raised a brow. "At the Ravel Club." He nodded. "I was miserable that night, already committed to something I didn't want, trying to convince myself that duty was better than desire. And then I saw you, standing alone. Like you weren't trying to belong, like you already did. I felt like an outsider. To everyone else, maybe, but to me, you looked like home." She held his gaze for a long time. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything. If the press ever comes after me again, if the pressure builds, will you promise not to fight back in public?" He blinked. "Why?" "Because I don't want this to become a war. I want to win quietly, like we've always done." He took a slow breath. "I promise." She clinked her glass against his. "To quiet wins," she said. "To the ones that last," he replied. They drank, and when they kissed that night, it wasn't desperate or dramatic. It was steady, earned, built on foundations they could both stand on. The first time they made love, it wasn't fireworks. It was stillness, slow, mutual, focused, like they were teaching each other how to be touched without fear. They hadn't planned it. There was no build-up, no dramatic storm of hands and clothes and hunger. It was after a long day, a simple one. Arel had fallen asleep on the couch beside him while reading over grant applications. Her glasses slipped down her nose, and her fingers still held a pen. He'd carried her to bed without waking her, but when she stirred hours later and found him lying beside her, eyes open, heart steady, she whispered, "I don't want to wait anymore." He sat up slowly, searching her face. "Are you sure?" She nodded. And then, for a long time, neither of them said a word. His touch wasn't urgent. His fingers trailed the edge of her collarbone, then her jaw. He kissed her gently at first, as if asking one last time if she wanted to be known this deeply. When she answered with her body, pressing into him, sliding under him, he let the weight of restraint fall. But not the care. He was careful. So was she. Their hands spoke for them. His lips moved down her neck, then lower. She lifted her hips, met his rhythm, gasped softly when he finally slid inside her, slow, full, real. They didn't rush. They didn't try to perfect it. They just let it be honest. Breath tangled, fingers laced, her name whispered like something sacred. And when she came, shaking, sighing into his skin, he followed close behind, pressing his face into her shoulder, as if he couldn't stand to lose contact. Afterward, they didn't move. He held her for what felt like hours, one arm tucked beneath her, the other circling her back, fingers resting at the base of her spine. The silence wasn't awkward. It was whole. Eventually she spoke. You know how they say the loudest thing in the world is a room full of people who don't know who you are? He nodded against her skin. This was the opposite. He didn't speak. He just kissed her bare shoulder and held her closer. Later, when she rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling, she whispered, "I didn't think I'd ever want to belong to someone again." His voice was low, thick with feeling. "You don't belong to me. You belong with me." She turned to him, and in the soft glow of the city lights pouring through the window, she saw it in his face, what love looked like when it wasn't trying to perform. They didn't fall asleep right away. They kept touching, small movements, fingers brushing knees, his thumb tracing her ribs, her hand in his hair. At one point, he whispered, "Does this feel like the start of forever to you?" She nodded. "Then let's protect it," he said. "Not by hiding it, but by choosing it again, every day." She kissed him, gently. And when they finally slept, it was the kind of sleep that comes when two people finally stop bracing for heartbreak. The next morning, she woke up first. He was still beside her, shirtless, peaceful. She slipped out of bed, pulled on one of his long-sleeve shirts and padded barefoot into the kitchen, made coffee, burned the first slice of toast, laughed to herself. He joined her 10 minutes later, hair messy, smile soft. "You look good in my shirt. You look like someone who needs breakfast before I accidentally poison him." He kissed her temple. They sat across from each other, sharing buttered toast and a bowl of strawberries. Between bites, she said, "Do you think people like us ever get to keep this?" He tilted his head. "Define people like us." People who weren't born into fairy tales, people who didn't grow up seeing love modeled the right way, who had to unlearn more than we inherited. He nodded slowly. "Maybe we don't keep it by default. Maybe we keep it by choice, effort, showing up even when it's messy." She smiled. "I can do messy." He reached across the table, took her hand. "Then let's build the kind of love that doesn't need an audience, just a foundation." Arelle didn't remember the last time she felt this light. Not in a childish way. Not careless, but free. She stood in front of the mirror in Darian's bathroom, wearing one of his crisp white shirts. The sleeves were long, swallowing her hands. Her curls were a soft mess. Her skin carried remnants of the night before, warmth, touch, tenderness. She smiled at her reflection without force. When Darian appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder, she didn't flinch. She leaned into him. "Stay the weekend," he whispered. She turned in his arms. "You have 3 board meetings, a press call, and a dinner with your attorneys. I'll cancel." "You can't cancel your board." He grinned. "They're used to being scared of me. Let them wonder what I'm doing instead." She laughed, pressing her forehead to his chest. "Do you always run from responsibility when you're happy?" "No," he said, "but I've never been happy like this." She looked up at him. "You're serious?" "I've spent my life making strategic moves. I forgot what it meant to make real ones." She let that sit between them. Then she pulled away slightly and asked, "Are you going to tell people about me? Are you ready for that?" He asked, serious now. "I don't want a circus," she said. "But I also don't want to be someone's secret." "You won't be." She met his eyes. "Not even when the articles start calling me your rebound, or saying I seduced you to get you to leave your wife." "You didn't seduce me." She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, maybe a little," he said, smirking. She rolled her eyes. "But no," he added, "you didn't chase me. You didn't even ask for my number. You walked away, and I realized how many things in my life I was holding on to just because I was afraid to choose differently. Arel exhaled. I've spent so long shrinking myself to fit into rooms that were too cold or too loud or too political. I don't want to do that anymore. Then don't, he said. Let me build a room for you instead. Later that afternoon, they took a walk through the conservatory gardens in Central Park. No cameras followed them. Just a few discreet nods from people who recognized him but respected the quiet. They sat on a bench under the cherry blossoms. She watched an older couple feeding birds a few feet away. Do you ever think you'll want that? She asked. The quiet life? I thought I never would, Darian said. But lately, I think peace might be the real luxury. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't bracing for disappointment. She just let herself be loved. But peace never lasts long in public lives. 3 days later, the media caught up. Photos of her stepping into Darian's penthouse surfaced online. Headlines followed. Billionaire Vale spotted with mystery woman days after annulment. Is this the real reason the power merger fell apart? Who is Arel Monet? She didn't read the articles, didn't need to. The stares she got at work said enough. Even Mina, her closest friend, blinked in shock when she showed up to her shift at the rooftop bar. You slept with him, didn't you? Mina whispered while slicing limes behind the bar. Arel just raised her eyebrows. Mina stared at her, jaw dropped. Girl, you were supposed to flirt, maybe kiss the guy once. You're dating him now? Arel didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. Mina laughed. Holy crap, you broke the billionaire. I didn't break him, Arel said softly. I think he was already cracked. I just reminded him he didn't have to stay that way. 2 weeks passed. The gossip slowed. Darian showed up at her apartment one night, with takeout and a bag of groceries. What's all this? She asked, standing barefoot in her kitchen. You said your mom used to make something called cinnamon squash stew. Her brows lifted. You remember that? I remember everything you said that night. They cooked together. It was messy. She burned her finger. He spilled ginger on the floor. The rice nearly boiled over, but the stew turned out okay. They sat on her small couch, knees touching, bowls in hand. It tastes like home, she said. Darian nodded. You feel like home. She leaned over, kissed him slow. The couch turned into soft kisses. Hands beneath shirts. Slow removal of clothes. This time, it wasn't about comfort. It was want, careful want, but no less consuming. He lifted her into his lap, and she wrapped her arms around him, letting the moment pull them under. They breathed each other in. He whispered her name like it steadied him. Afterward, she rested her head on his chest. Are we doing this right? She whispered. He stroked her arm. There's no map, just trust. The next morning, Arel got a call. An editor at a women's publication wanted to interview her, not as Darian Vale's new girlfriend, but as herself. They'd looked up her grant applications, her non-profit essays, her volunteer work. Your voice deserves to be heard, the editor said. Arel blinked. Are you sure this isn't a setup? It's not. The world wants gossip, but we'd like to offer context. Truth. She hesitated, then said yes. The article came out 3 days later. More than a headline, Meet the woman Darian Vale chose, and why she doesn't owe you an explanation. It went viral. Not for the drama, but for the honesty. People weren't used to seeing the quiet woman get the spotlight. But they liked it. They respected her. Even her boss called and offered her a permanent position and a raise. Arel smiled when she read the message. Not because she finally had attention, but because she finally had direction. And the love she'd stepped into, it didn't shrink under the pressure. It grew. Arel wasn't used to being known. Not like this. Not by strangers whispering her name at work. Not by photographers stationed across her building. Not by polished news anchors debating whether she was a phase or a statement. She kept her head down. She didn't respond to comments. She didn't argue online. She focused on what she could control. Waking up on time, making real food, calling her mother every Sunday. But some days, the noise still got in. She sat at the kitchen counter one morning, scrolling through her phone, her fingers hovering over a news alert. Darlan Vale faces boardroom pressure over latest personal discretion. She didn't open it. She didn't have to. She already knew. Every time he stood beside her in public, his company's value dipped. Every interview he declined made analysts suspicious. Every time he smiled without explaining himself, they saw weakness. But he kept choosing her, even when it cost him. Even when his advisors called it reckless. Even when his father, who rarely spoke, told him he was throwing away decades of legacy. Darian didn't flinch. But Ariel did. She looked at him one night while they lay in bed, his arm draped over her waist, his breathing even, and quietly asked, "What are you giving up for me?" His eyes opened. "What do you mean?" "All of this. Your company, your leverage, your peace." "You're not costing me peace, Ariel. I'm costing you your seat." He sat up slowly. "You think I care about that more than I care about you. I don't want to become the reason your world burns." He cupped her face. "My world was built on deals I didn't believe in. This, us, is the first honest decision I've made in years." She leaned into his hand, but the doubt still lingered. That week, she got a visit. Not from paparazzi, not from a journalist, but from her past. Her ex-fiancé, Micah, showed up at the rooftop bar where she used to work. She hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. He stood at the edge of the counter, same crooked smile, same quiet sarcasm. "I heard you're dating a billionaire now," he said casually. She blinked. "Micah, you look good. Don't do that." "What?" "Don't come here like you didn't disappear on me after our engagement party." He looked down. "Yeah, I wasn't proud of that." "Then why are you here?" He hesitated. "I saw your interview, the article. You looked like yourself again." Ariel folded her arms. "And that made you decide to pop back in?" "I just wanted to say I was wrong, for walking away, for thinking you were too much, too ambitious, too principled." She didn't say anything. He added, "He's lucky. I hope he knows that." And then he walked away. No pitch, no ask, just words. She didn't tell Darian, not because she was hiding, but because some memories didn't need airtime. They needed to be buried. The next board meeting came, and this time, Darian didn't bring her. Not out of shame, but to protect her. He knew what was coming. The board voted to suspend his position as Chief Strategy Officer. Temporarily, they claimed, while internal restructuring occurred. He left the meeting silent. Ariel waited for him outside the office building. When he reached her, he didn't say anything. She wrapped her arms around him in the back of the car. "You knew this was coming," she said quietly. He nodded. "Doesn't mean it didn't hurt." She kissed his temple. "You can build again," she said. "Maybe something better this time." He looked at her. "Will you build it with me?" She didn't hesitate. Yes. Later that night, they sat on his balcony overlooking Central Park. Ariel wore a hoodie. Darian held a glass of water, not wine. They were quiet, but it wasn't heavy silence. It was choosing each other's silence. Darian finally broke it. "I never told you what happened with my mother." Ariel turned toward him. "She left when I was 11. No note, no warning. Just vanished." She didn't interrupt. "She used to tell me the world would always ask me to trade love for power, that the real trick was learning I didn't have to." "What happened to her?" Ariel asked softly. "No one knows. My father hired every investigator in New York. No leads." She touched his hand. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "I used to think love made people weak, that it made them leave." She looked at him. "And now? I think it makes you strong enough to stay." The next morning, Darian surprised her. He'd bought a brownstone in Harlem, not a mansion, not a penthouse, a 3-story historic building with soft light, worn brick, and a private garden in the back. "I don't need the skyscrapers anymore," he said. She blinked. "You're serious?" "I want to build something from scratch, with you. Not on top of headlines, not behind tinted glass. He held out a key. "I want you to live with me. If you want that." She didn't cry, but her heart did something it hadn't in years. It settled. She took the key. As she packed that week, she found an old photo strip in a drawer. One she and Mina had taken the night of the Ravel Club party. The first frame was awkward. The second frame blurry. The third, her laughing mid-smile. She stared at it. The night that changed everything. Arel had stepped into that party not looking for anything, and somehow found a man who was willing to lose the world to be seen. Now they had a quiet brownstone, a fresh start, a second chance. And for the first time in her life, Arel didn't feel like she was holding her breath. She felt held. The brownstone smelled like new beginnings. Arel stood in the middle of the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the large windows. Her hands rested on her hips, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "This doesn't feel real," she murmured. Darian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "It's real. Every wall, every window, ours." The last box sat near the door, books mostly. A few photos. Nothing loud, nothing that screamed press-worthy. And that's what made it sacred. Darian didn't need marble floors to feel powerful anymore. He needed a space where he could exhale. And so did she. They painted the bedroom together, getting specks of cream-colored paint on their faces. Darian tried to follow instructions. Arel teased him when he didn't. They picked out furniture with no brand names, chose throw pillows based on comfort, not design trends. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. One evening, while sorting through old papers, Arel stumbled on a journal from her college years. She hadn't written in it for a while, but inside were words she barely recognized: dreams, fears, vows to never settle and always protect her peace. She smiled. "You okay?" Darian asked, walking in with 2 mugs of tea. She nodded. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to understand the younger me better now." He handed her the tea. "What did she say?" She said she wanted love without conditions, a life that felt quiet, not empty, a man who could see her fully and not flinch. Darian raised a brow. "And?" She met his gaze. "She'd be proud I waited." He kissed her forehead. That week, Darian got an offer. A major investor offered to help him launch a new firm, one that wouldn't answer to legacy shareholders or political marriages. The investor asked for one thing only: clarity of vision. Darian agreed. They scheduled the first pitch meeting, but this time, instead of pitching in a tower, he hosted the meeting in the brownstone. No suits, no pretense. He laid out his goals: innovation, integrity, independence. When the meeting ended, the investor said, "This version of you is more dangerous than the one who had everything." Darian took that as a compliment. One morning, Arel got a letter. It was from the same temp agency that placed her in the interior design firm months ago. Only this time, it wasn't a temp offer. It was a full-time role, creative liaison between design clients and project teams. They said her calm, her intuition, her ability to read people made her stand out. She looked at Darian across the breakfast table. "Should I take it? Do you want it?" She nodded. "It's not glamorous, but it feels real." He smiled. "Then you take it." They weren't building empires. They were building a life. A month passed. Then 2. By the 3rd, the world had moved on from the headlines. New scandals, new billionaires, new gossip. But in the quiet corners of New York, a different kind of story was being written. Arel and Darian went on long walks, grocery shopped without being chased, hosted dinners with no photographers outside. They had arguments about toothpaste caps and dinner timing. They also had nights where they couldn't stop touching each other, where they curled under blankets and whispered future baby names neither of them was ready to admit they loved. It was honest. It was slow. It was theirs. One rainy afternoon, Darian came home soaked. He found Arel in the living room, sipping tea with a blanket draped over her lap. "You look like a storm survivor," she teased. He pulled off his coat, dripping. You'll love the reason. What? He pulled a ring box from his pocket. She froze. No fancy setup, no flash mobs, he said, stepping closer. Just a man who knows exactly who he wants beside him. Her throat tightened. He knelt. I don't care if we get married next week or next year. I don't care if the dress costs $10 or 10,000. I just want to wake up with you, build with you, laugh and mess up and fix it all with you. He opened the box. It wasn't a massive diamond. It was a vintage rose gold band with a single sapphire. She didn't say yes. She dropped to her knees with him and kissed him. And that said everything. They didn't announce the engagement. No PR photos, no press release. Just close friends, whispered Joy, and one quiet dinner where Mina cried and said, You deserve every bit of this. The city didn't stop, but for once, the noise wasn't louder than their love. It started with a knock, a soft one. 3 taps. Arel glanced at the clock. Just after 9. The brownstone was quiet, the city hum distant. Darian was out back tending to the small garden he insisted on growing himself. She opened the door slowly. A man in a dark jacket stood on the steps, holding a folder. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't threatening either. Ms. Monet? Yes. He held out the folder. From the Vale Holdings legal office. It's not urgent, but it's personal. He asked this be delivered by hand. She took it. Thank you. The man left without another word. She closed the door, heart ticking faster than it should. She opened the folder. Inside, a legal letter from the company's board, acknowledging Darian's final divestment, the last signatures, the last papers, his father's signature crossed out in red, a note scribbled beside it. He's not weak for leaving. He's finally free. Arel stared at those words, not because she didn't believe them, but because they weren't written by Darian. They were written by his mother. Darian returned with dirt under his nails and a grin on his face. I think the mint finally took root. She held up the letter. He read it, then sat down on the couch and rubbed his eyes. It's over, he whispered. She sat beside him. Not over, just yours now. He turned to her. I spent so long thinking I had to prove something to men who only wanted control. You already proved it, she said softly. You walked away. The next few weeks moved like calm water. They got used to the new pace. No shareholder calls, no advisors in earpieces, just coffee, morning walks, emails that didn't demand his soul. Arel watched Darian become lighter, not smaller, just freer. He started mentoring 2 young founders who were building tech platforms for artists of color. He refused to take equity. Just build something good, he told them. And remember that power isn't owning the room. It's being able to leave it. They cried. Arel cried too. One night, they hosted their first real dinner party. 6 guests. Close friends. Candles. Music from a playlist they made together. Mina brought wine and a too loud laugh. One of Darian's mentees came with homemade empanadas. Someone brought records. Someone else played chess with Darian on the floor. Arel sat back and looked around the room. No flash, no stress, just people who weren't performing. Darian caught her eye and mouthed, You good? She nodded. He winked. The next morning, Arel stood in the kitchen with a fresh mug of tea and looked out the window. It was raining, softly, but her chest didn't feel heavy anymore when it rained. Rain used to mean small apartments, hard months, loneliness. Now, it meant warmth, a quiet home. A partner who always came back to her. She didn't know what the world would say about them next. Didn't care. Because the life they were building wasn't made for headlines. It was made for healing. They planned a small wedding. No Napa Valley. No speeches from political heirs. Just 20 chairs in a Brooklyn garden and a man who rewrote his life for the woman who reminded him what it meant to feel again. She wore a tea-length dress. He wore a dark shirt with sleeves rolled up. No press, no drama, just vows spoken between raindrops and a kiss that didn't need anyone's approval. The wedding was quiet, but the afterglow wasn't. They didn't take a long honeymoon, no yachts, no 5-star resorts, Instead, they spent 3 nights at a borrowed cabin near Bear Mountain. No service, no schedules, no curated photos. Just firewood, warm socks and nights wrapped around each other like the world outside never existed. Darian didn't bring a laptop. Erel didn't pack makeup. On the second night, as wind whispered through the trees, she lay on his chest and whispered, "Are you afraid?" He looked at the ceiling for a while, then said, "Not of this." She looked up. "I'm afraid of who I used to be, the man who almost let you go. I still see him sometimes." She kissed his collarbone. "I saw him too, but he's gone now." He exhaled. "You sure?" She nodded. "He left the moment you stayed." They returned to the city different, not transformed, just settled. He went back to mentoring. She took on a project at the design firm, pro bono work, turning unused corporate spaces into art therapy centers for kids in low-income neighborhoods. They didn't chase exposure. They chased impact. Every morning, they walked to the bagel shop 2 blocks down. Every night, they cooked together, slow recipes, jazz playing low, dishes done together before bed. One night, he turned to her mid-dishwashing and said, "This is what I never knew I wanted." She smiled. "This is what I never thought I'd get." One day, the media came knocking again. Not with scandal, but with curiosity. One outlet ran a headline, "The billionaire who burned the blueprint." Another followed, "Vale's new life." No boardrooms, just bookstores. And while Darian refused every interview, he smiled when he read them. "Let them wonder," he said. "I'm not their story anymore." Erel grinned. "No, you're mine." In the spring, Mina brought over a tiny kitten she found under a train bench. They kept her, named her Chance, because sometimes that's all it takes. One chance, one night, one choice to rewrite everything. One evening, as the sky burned orange over Central Park, Erel sat on the balcony with a journal. Darian came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed the top of her head. "You writing?" She nodded. "Trying." "About what?" "About how some stories don't start where they're supposed to." He leaned into her ear. "And how do they end?" She turned, looked up at him. "They don't," she said. "They just begin again." Braver. 1 year later, she spoke at a women's mentorship event. She wore a simple dress, no designer label, no entourage. She stood on a small stage in a downtown library and told a room full of women, "I didn't grow up with power. I grew up with reminders of what I couldn't do, where I couldn't go, what I couldn't ask for. But something shifted when I stopped asking. When I stopped waiting for the world to approve of me, and just chose myself." You're not weak for hoping. You're not soft for wanting love that feels like safety. And no matter what the world tells you, you don't have to shrink to survive. The right person won't need you to play smaller. They'll hand you the pen and say, "Write the next chapter how you want." The room stood to clap before she finished. But she wasn't speaking for applause. She was speaking to the version of herself who once stood in a borrowed dress, heels shaking, heart guarded, believing love wasn't hers to keep. Darian watched from the back of the room. He didn't need to stand beside her to be proud. He just needed to see her glow. When they left that night, she didn't hold his hand out of dependence. She held it because it was hers to hold, and his to offer. You made it to the end, but real love stories never really end. They evolve. Quietly, bravely, away from the cameras and closer to truth. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love isn't about the perfect beginning, but about choosing each other after the storm, share this with someone who needs that reminder. Like, comment, subscribe. And remember, your story is never too small to matter.